Since its inception in the 1930s, members of Rastafari have been targeted by the Jamaican government. In fact, two of its founders, Robert Hines and Leonard Howell, were found guilty of sedition in 1934. By 1937, Howell was out of prison and living in St. Thomas, where he continued preaching, but there were still calls for him to be targeted. And one of these calls came from Alexander Bustamante, future Prime Minister of Jamaica and one of the most prominent voices in the country at this time. In July 1939, he wrote a letter to the state calling for Howell to be arrested for preaching this, quote, terrible thing that is called Rastafari, end quote. With this, and calls from more prominent Jamaicans, attacks against Rastas became more rampant. Due to this, by the early 1940s, Howell and others relocated to Pinnacle in St. Catherine and created their own Rasta society. They also started a marijuana farm, despite the law now being strengthened so that possession of any quantity of ganja meant automatic imprisonment. But Pinnacle's ganja trade was allowed to flourish by the state. This was so because the crop was being sent to the British to help them in World War II. But in 1953, the UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill visited Jamaica.
Friday, January the 9th, 1953, was a historic day for Jamaica. At precisely 5 minutes to 5 o'clock, the personal plane of the President of the United States, the Independence, touched down at the Montego Bay Airport, bringing for the first time to these shores the Right Honorable Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Great Britain, for a well-earned 2-week vacation. Mrs. Churchill and their daughter, Mrs. Soames, had preceded him 3 days before, and he had come to join them. He was met at the plane by His Excellency the Governor, Sir Hugh Foote, and Sir Harold Mitchell, at whose home in St. Mary the Prime Minister was to spend his holiday. After taking some 20 paces across the airstrip, he faced a smart array of police constables which formed his guard of honor. Then the general salute was played. The Prime Minister next met the Honorable W.A. Bustamante, who presented him with a box of Jamaican cigars. He had met Mr. Bustamante before, and had certainly not forgotten him. He was afterwards introduced to members of the Executive Council, the custodes of St. James and Trelawney, members of the House of Representatives, and members of the St. James Parochial Board. Then, with His Excellency the Governor, he stepped into a waiting car watched by the delighted crowds.
Then, a year later, in May 1954, the police raided Pinnacle, seizing 8 tons of ganja. As the academic Dr. Jalani Nair puts it, the raid was to, quote, remove traces of evidence of the facilitation that Howell was able to provide the war, end quote. The raid was the largest in Jamaica's police history up to this point. Days later, thousands of ganja plants and seeds were burnt, and 140 Rastas, mostly women, were arrested and charged. By the late 1950s, Pinnacle was burnt to the ground, and the early days of Jamaica's ganja export industry and Rasta's contribution to World War II was lost with it. Today, Rastas are still fighting for Pinnacle's legacy.